This session is titled Humane Learning in the Machine Age, tapping history and the classics for technological advice. Will be presented by Josh Paulin, who's a classical educator, furniture maker, and vicar at All Saints Lutheran Church, LCMS, in Charlotte, North Carolina. Please welcome Vicar Paulin.
All right, thank you so much for being here today. If you were here yesterday for my session in the auditorium, it's the same thing. So if you need to pick up and leave now, feel free, I won't be offended. But if you weren't here yesterday, I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad to be doing this with you all today. And it is related to what was going to be in this room anyway, the screen time topic. We're going to deal with that at a little bit of length here. First off, I want to see your phones. Show me what you got. Pull them out. Wave them around. All right. Let's see. Is there any flip phones in the room? No flip phones. Okay, I would like you to turn them off, okay, or put them on silent, one or the other, and put them not on your person, okay, and not in your sight, all right? If you want to play along, you're adults, so you don't have to, but if this was a classroom, you would have to play along, right? Not on your person, okay, or not in your sight. And the reason I'm telling you to do that, because research shows that when they are on our person or in our sight, our attention is reduced and our anxiety goes up. Okay. And honestly, the research also shows that even if it's in the same room, I'm not going to ask you all to leave yet. But that's just an interesting piece of research that we're getting more and more findings that sort of substantiate that. That the device is so alluring and distracting that just if it's on our person or in our sight line, our attention starts to be scattered and fragmented, and our anxiety starts to go up. People are wondering what we're going to find on the device, right? What's the notification going to be? What's the latest email? Whatever it might be. Right? Okay, so thank you for doing that. I want us to be fully present with each other, right? And that can be one way to lead you not into temptation. All right, so we're going to do a lot today. I've got the session outlined for you on the handout. Everybody got one? Yeah. All right. I apologize for the printing there. The border's not working right. Contact information's on the back.
Excuse me, do you have any more by chance?
Yeah.
Thank you.
My ones yesterday, I ran out. The auditorium was full yesterday, so I had to print some. Dr. Haley helped me with that, but the barcodes didn't work out right, so I apologize about that. Two main tasks today. First, I want to talk briefly about why the machine age classroom fails. And what I mean by the machine age classroom is the average classroom in the 21st century in sort of a normal school, where a lot of the learning is digitally mediated to us, okay, through a screen, through a device, through all sorts of things that are digital and screen-based, okay? But before we do that, I always like to take a step back when I present on technology to sort of pull back the curtain a little bit and help us think carefully about technology in general, okay? So I want to address a few technological myths and debunk them. Now, as we're going along in this presentation, please, especially with a small group like this, raise your hand at any time, okay? If you have questions, if we need clarification, or if you want to push back on something you're saying. All right, I especially appreciate that, because it helps us clarify what we're really saying and not saying, especially with an issue like this. So please, at any time. So first off, we're going to address 3 technological myths that I think we need to debunk to help us get the framework then for dealing with questions like AI, questions like screen time, questions like devices in the classroom, and so forth. So first off, first technological myth, technology equals progress. Okay, technology equals progress. I'm calling that a technological myth. I think it would be more accurate to say technology equals trade-offs. Technology equals trade-offs. Okay. The assumption in our world today is, in general, that technology equals progress. That just because we can, we should. Just because we can do something technologically, we should do it technologically. Okay. What we need to do is think about the trade-offs that technologies bring. Okay. And we could do this with any technology. But let's take the car for an example. Okay. The car is a technology, right? It's a complex mechanical technology. And in our world today, it's even a computerized technology as well, right? If you've ever tried to actually fix your car nowadays, you a lot of times can't even do it, right? You've got to take it into the mechanic, and he has to run the scanner, right, to see what the computer says, right? A lot of them you can't even like get to the engine. There's like this shroud that covers it, right? You need these special screwdrivers to unhook the shroud, right? It's just, even that mechanical technology is becoming a digital technology. But nonetheless, let's think about trade-offs of the car, okay? What does the car positively do for us? What does the car negatively do for us? Okay, what's the give and take of the car? Somebody give me something. Give me a trade-off of the car.
You get there faster.
All right, so that's positive, right?
Yeah.
All right, what's a negative? Or do you have another positive?
You can see more family from farther away more easily.
Okay, it allows us to see people from far away. It allows us to have an event like this, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So there are tons of positives of a car. What are some of the negatives? What are some of the trade-offs?
Expense.
Okay, so it costs money to upkeep a car, right, to fill it with gasoline and so forth.
Yes.
It gets me where I'm going on the GPS, but now I no longer know north, south, east, west.
Okay, so yeah, we sort of go to the GPS question, right, which again simplifies things, makes things easier, but also we lose something in the meantime, where we're trading our ability to navigate time and space, to understand directions and so forth, right? And that would sort of be an offshoot of the car. But let's think more foundationally about the car. What are negative impacts of the car on society? Yeah.
It diminishes community because people are not.
That's a huge one, right? It might be a blessing to allow us to get to family that's far away, but what was it that allowed us to move away in the first place? The car, right? The car has huge fragmenting effects on society and on families, right? And this is well documented historically with the amount of people that begin moving away, farther away from family when the car becomes widespread, okay? So we do lose out on something as far as close-knit communities. And some have argued that it also had a huge impact on the church, right? Where no longer is your church sort of the center hub of the community, right? But instead, you can drive to churches that are not in your community, right? That has an impact as to what it means to be a member of a church, okay?
If it's a Lutheran church, it's a good thing you can drive to it.
Yeah, again, trade-offs, right? But what are we losing out on in the fact that we're not actually living around our church community, right? And that life together.
Everyone around us
that
is our
occurs.
church family, yeah.
Right, yeah, there's certainly trade-offs there. And this might be a funny one, students certainly get a kick out of this one, but it also, the widespread adoption of the car led to an increase of teen sexual activity. Okay, because now you have unsupervised spaces, backseat, right, when the car first emerged as a widespread adoption. Another one would be landscapes begin changing. The way we design cities, okay, with interstates that really divide communities and destroy parts of cities, right, to make way for the car. We really design our spaces for the car, not for people, right? So you get the idea of trade-off there, right? And again, you could do this with any technology. I think it's a very good exercise to do when you consider a technology, all right? What am I gaining, but also what am I giving up, okay? Neil Postman calls technology a Faustian bargain, okay? Faustian bargain. You're getting something, yes, but you're also losing something, okay? That's important to realize. Technology does not equal progress. Technology equals trade-offs. Okay, first myth. Second myth, technology is neutral. Okay, technology is neutral. How many of you have heard that? It's technology is neutral, it's just a matter of how you use it. You heard that? Yeah, I heard you said that, right? I want to push back on that. I'd rather say technology is a nudge. Technology is a nudge. Okay. Technology is a nudge. And we know this. We know this even with very basic technologies. Finish the saying for me. If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Okay? The hammer's a technology, it's a tool, it's a technique. Okay? When I have it in my hand, it nudges me towards hammering. Now, it's not deterministic. It doesn't force me to hammer things, but it nudges me towards hammering. Okay? Now, I have a shop. I make furniture as a way to make some money, generate some income. And in the summers, we host summer camps. We call it Closer to Home. And we do shop class and home ec class. And I give kids hammers. okay? And when the week is over, and I go around my shop, I find dents where there's not supposed to be dents, right? Because the hammer nudges you towards hammering, okay? Any left-handed people in here? Okay, oh great, wow, that's a lot. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's almost like half the people. Give me an example of a technology that nudges you towards right-handedness.
Can openers.
Can openers, yeah. What about scissors?
Caesar.
Scissors, right? Even the car, right? Where are most of the mechanisms to change gears and so forth? They're usually designed for the right hand, okay? It's nudging you towards using your right hand, okay? So I think that also is a helpful way to think about technology. Technology is always nudging you in a direction because technology is designed by people for certain tasks. Technology doesn't just appear. It's not a found object. It's a designed object by a designer who wants it to be used in a certain way. Okay, so it's nudging you somewhere. But nowadays we don't just carry around a hammer or scissors, right? Or I guess you don't carry in a car, but you get the point. Now we carry around something that can do much more than hammering. Right, we carry around what I like to call an omni-tool, an all tool. Okay, it doesn't just hammer, does it? And by that I mean the digital device, the digital interface. Right? It's not just a hammer. I would argue it's categorically different because it does so many things. Okay, and not only does it do so many things, it does another thing that hammers don't do. It talks back. Right? It talks back. It's much more immersive and interactive, okay? And it plays on your desires because the design of the device is not neutral, okay? And we'll unpack that a little bit more as we go along. But that is the myth, technology is neutral. Instead, I think it's better to say technology is a nudge. Now, I'm not saying technology is bad. Please hear me on that, okay? That's not my argument. My argument is that it's not neutral. That's a different argument. Okay, I'm arguing that it is not neutral, that it is nudging you, and that by realizing that, then we can better decide and navigate how to use or not to use such things. Okay, by realizing that such things are nudging us, then we can interrogate it. How is it nudging us? How is it designed to nudge us? Towards what? Right? Towards what ends? Okay. Third technological myth, that is AI is intelligent. AI is intelligent. So I want to briefly talk about AI here a little bit to give you a, I'm going to come up here, it's not enough for me to stand up there. Ooh, wow, do I even need that? Okay, so AI is intelligent. First off, I want to just make sure we're understanding by what I'm meaning by AI, artificial intelligence. When we hear that term today, you tell me, what are people thinking of when they say AI in general? Things like what?
Chatbots?
Chatbots, right? ChatGPT and so forth. I think that's what comes to mind most frequently. Okay. Now there are all sorts of AI that's baked into a lot of programs that you already use, right? I mean, if you think about spell checking as a form of AI, right? Autocomplete, all those types of things are like low-level AI. Okay. But right now, sort of all the rage is the question of the chatbot, right? So let's talk about how a chatbot works, which will help us debunk this myth that AI is intelligent. Now, side note, AI, I'm not really a fan of that term in general because the term intelligence is baked into the concept, right? So we're already humanizing it by using AI. For the sake of just moving along, I'm going to keep using it in our conversation. But I do think it is important to think about what's actually a better term for this than AI.
Search engine.
No, not exactly. It's more than a search engine because it isn't compiling information in the way that a search engine isn't. But some say machine learning. That might be a little better than AI. But even learning is a human concept. Okay, it's not learning. It's not conscious. It's not intelligent. Here's why. The way a large language model works is it takes massive amounts of human text, okay? Text from the internet, text from digitized books, okay? And you can put parameters on what the large language model is, where it's getting its text. But basically, we're talking about billions and billions of human words, okay, that are produced by human beings, that are then put into this large language model, okay? And then the chatbot predicts what it should say next based on that massive amount of data, okay? So basically, it's a complex predictive engine, okay? It's predicting what word should come next. It's a mimicking machine, is what it is. It's a mimicking machine. It's predicting what word should come next when it's given a query or a prompt. Now, I know I'm sort of condensing what AI is, but I do have a longer explanation of this. I'm going to pass around just a few sheets here. I have a book on this coming out later this year. It's called Are We All Cyborgs Now? Where I have a co-author, so I'm saying we, where we look at these types of questions: AI, education and technology, the church and technology, the family and technology. It's really a resource book. It's over 500 pages, so you don't need to read straight through. But maybe if you're a teacher, you want to read the education section, right? Or if you're involved in the church, you want to read the church section. The chapters stand alone, but they also sort of are interconnected. So I'm going to just pass around. If you want to put your email down and your name down, if you're interested in, I'll start one here, start one in the back. No pressure, you certainly don't have to put your info down. But if you want to know when the book comes out, I'd be happy to email you with the information. I've also got another book on there coming out as well. It's called Education's End. Gene Veith, grateful for him writing a little forward on that one. That book sort of talks about my experience in the public schools and then getting out of that and so forth. What are the ends of education and why are public schools failing and so forth. So shameless plug, sorry. So yeah, in the book we flesh out this AI question more, but I'm just trying to distill it down for purposes of our time. So it's a prediction machine, okay? It's a mimicking machine. I'll give you one example to maybe make it a little more concrete. In English, if I say the word apple, what's a common word that could come next in English?
Sauce.
Sauce, core,
Treat.
Juice.
Hot juice.
hot, juice, right? All sorts of words could come after apple, okay? And we could predict what's supposed to come next. And sometimes we'd be right, and sometimes we'd be wrong, right? That's what large language models are doing. They're taking all the massive amounts of text that they've analyzed, okay, and then predicting what word should come after apple, if you will, okay? Now, it's doing that time after time after time, word after word after word, based on the words that have come before, right, the question that's been asked, okay? But that's really what it's doing. It's a prediction machine. So that means it's going to be right a lot of times, especially if the amount of data it's taking in is massive, right? But it is going to be wrong sometimes. Sometimes it'll be catastrophically wrong, right? And a recent example of this was with the question of what you should do if cheese is falling off your pizza.
Oh, no.
Okay, did any of you hear about this? So if you ask, I forget if it was ChatGPT or Google Gemini or one of these large language models, but basically it was prompted or queried with the question, what should you do if cheese is falling off your pizza? And guess what it said? You should glue it back on. You should glue it back on. Not good advice. But I think that is a clear example of the fact that these are not intelligences, okay? They're not intelligent. They're prediction machines. They're mimicking machines. Now, don't get me wrong. They are amazing pieces of human ingenuity and engineering, right? Very complex. But where does the intelligence lie? With the designer, okay? Not with the program or the ones and zeros that are making all this happen, okay? The intelligence lies with the people that have designed them. So I would change the myth, AI is intelligent, to AI is designed by an intelligence. Okay? And that intelligence is a human being or human beings. Now, large language models are also constantly being tweaked, monitored by human beings because they say wrong things. Okay? There's people whose job it is to monitor them and to train them to not make such silly mistakes as saying put glue on pizza, right? And so, you know, again, there's a human being that is behind these things, allowing them to do what they do. Okay, so those are three big myths that I think are important to debunk. Any questions, thoughts, comments, pushback on those? Yeah, go
I have
ahead.
a question. Who
Sure.
uses ChatGPT or Why? Like, I've never had, I'm old, but why?
Your students. Lots of people.
For cheating?
Oh, yeah.
I teach pre-K, so they don't.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Yes, that's a valid question, right? This may seem so out there and ethereal, but it is not, okay? If you teach high schoolers and you don't think they're experimenting with ChatGPT, you are being naive, okay? You're being naive, okay? I teach in a classical conversations community. I had 6 seniors this last year, okay? Wonderful kids. And it's a 1-day-a-week co-op, right? Almost every week we had a side conversation about either a chatbot or an AI image generator, okay, almost every week. They were experimenting with these things, okay? And it was important to engage in those discussions to try to give them the framework for thinking about these things. This is also a problem at the college level. There's been all sorts of articles in the last few years about what to do with the writing assignment, okay? Is the essay dead, okay? There's tons of writing about this as colleges are trying to scramble to figure out what to do about ChatGPT. Okay, so yeah, it is especially a danger in relation to education once you start to write, okay, or do anything where students are having to gather information. So that's one big field. A lot of people are just interested in it. They begin to query it and ask it questions, and it is fascinating. I mean, there's a chapter in the book where my co-author writes about his experience basically querying ChatGPT and the types of things it could do. And he got addicted for a time because it's just so sort of mind-boggling, the types of things that it can create. If you tell it to write a play in Shakespeare style about me marrying my wife, it'll do that, okay? It'll do that. Then you can say, no, tweak it, end the story so that I divorce my wife, right? And it'll do that. No, change the voice. Let's go from Shakespeare to Euripides, right? It'll do that, okay? So its capabilities are massive and impressive. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. ChatGPT has just released a new edition called ChatGPT 4.0, not 4.0, 4.0 as in the letter O, which stands for Omni, all, okay? And this can not only produce texts, it can produce images, it can produce sounds, it can produce video, okay? And that opens up a whole another level of concern when it comes to what we call deep fakes, okay? The ability to put anybody in a video of doing anything that would be damaging to them in their career, okay? The level of propaganda will explode. There's already been AI videos being used in political campaigns this year, okay? So this is like, it's already here, okay? And I'll give you one more example of where it's here. So I mentioned high school, my own classroom, mentioned college, and then also in the academic realm. In March of 2024, this year, there was an article published in a journal called Surfaces and Interfaces. It's a journal about technology and all sorts of things. And the first line of the article, let me just get the words so I don't get it wrong. The first line of the article went like this. Certainly, here is a possible introduction for your topic. Lithium metal batteries are promising candidates for high energy density rechargeable batteries due to their low electrode potentials and high theoretical capacities. Now, if you've interacted with ChatGPT, you know exactly what that first line was. That's a ChatGPT response to a query, okay? So in other words, the writer of this article asked ChatGPT to summarize its article for the introduction. And ChatGPT responds with, certainly, here's your introduction. That's like classic ChatGPT, okay? But this person copied and pasted. This was published in an academic journal, okay? And this was all over the internet when this was published. Again, it shows us that this is creeping into all levels. This is a professor, okay, who was using this to summarize his own paper to put an introduction for his paper. And it even snuck through the review process. Honestly, probably what happened is he submitted a draft, and the peer reviewers probably said, this is good, just add an introduction. And then he was like, oh, geez, all right, fine. Tell me an introduction. Put it up there, and then the guys just sort of passed it through. That's probably what happened. But still, right? I mean, that's just, so this is a real problem that you will face if you're not already. Okay, that's a good question. I appreciate that. Somebody else, did you have a question, Kate?
Yes, and if this is off topic, you can save for the end or we can talk later, but
Okay.
you mentioned the trade-offs of technology, and especially with the long distances, with communication and transportation technology, how do we as faithful Lutherans try to build a local community, but also the trade-off with that and communities like this, like the CCLE,
Yeah.
where we're trying to get to know each other from across distances? How do we, any thoughts
I'll
on
save that for
that?
the end for time.
All
It's a broader question, it's an important one. I don't know if I cracked the code on that, but it is important, yeah. Yeah, so let's save that. Anything else so far? Okay, all right. I'll give one more example of where this pops up, and this is seminaries. Okay, Dr. Nordling was talking with me yesterday after the session about discussions he's been having. Why do we teach students Greek now? Because they can just put in the Greek passage into one of the chatbots and get a perfect translation. Right? He's really struggling with this. Like he is distraught about this. As a man who spent his life in the classical languages, and now all of a sudden a chatbot can do it in seconds. Right? And my response was, well, you've been formed as a human being by going through that process and learning the languages. Right? And that's, I think, going to have to be, we're going to really have to help our students understand that they're taking huge shortcuts and they're damaging themselves as people by taking shortcuts because they're not going through the challenge, the risk, the friction, and the human development and formation that occurs through doing hard things. Part of being a human being is doing hard things. And that refines us and that develops us, right? I used to work at a seminary before I was a Lutheran Reformed Theological Seminary, where I was a student there, and I worked in their virtual campus like 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago now. And one of their tech guys I've stayed in touch with, and he says in all their like faculty meetings, this is becoming a huge point of discussion. What do we do about student papers? And what's interesting with ChatGPT, it will also generate fake footnotes. Okay, so even if you have it write the paper, it will also generate fake footnotes. What I mean, it'll create a source, okay, that then it cites to support something it said in its paper. Now, it used to be, when you tried to catch plagiarism, it was pretty easy. Because you could tell when the font changed, or you could tell when the voice changed, right, or the vocab level, all those things. Any teacher who's read a bunch of essays, you can tell when somebody's plagiarizing. And the way you catch them was, well, you'd then type that sentence into Google, and you'd find the sentence. Oh, that's from Wikipedia. Oh, that's from here. Oh, that's from there. And then you can tell the student, nope, here's your essay, here's the sentence, plagiarism. Try again, right, or whatever your policy is. With ChatGPT, you can't do that. Okay. Because there's no internet record or archive of the text that it generates. Okay. So plagiarism is going to be much more difficult to detect as well, because you can't do that Google check. Now, there are systems that are being developed and already you can purchase to check for AI when you're looking at essays and papers. But guess how it checks for AI? With AI, right? So it's just like this cycle. So it's a big challenge. But let's keep moving here. Okay. So what do we do about all these technological problems? Just for the sake of time, I'm going to say read this book. Okay. If you want to see the key research about what to do in relation to technological questions in your classroom, in your home, and I would even say even in the church, this is an excellent place to start. It is highly accessible. He compiles a lot of the research so you don't have to go digging here, there, and everywhere. And he's got a humble tone, okay? He's really just trying to get to the bottom of this. So I'm not going to go through all the arguments here and there and research. I'd say read this book. It is fascinating. Now, I would say even more interesting, this guy's not a Christian at all. He is friendly and respectful towards Christianity. I think Jonathan Haidt is actually one of the most important voices in our culture right now, and we can resonate with him on a lot of things. He's basically a social psychologist, or you might say cognitive sociologist, depending on how you term what he does. He comes very much from an evolutionary perspective, but I do not think it affects his arguments that he's making at all. But I'm just letting you know, right? This isn't a Christian book, but that's fine. I mean, we need to be engaging with different ideas and all that. So that's a book I would say go to for key research. If you really want to like justify your policies on technology in the classroom, why you're doing what you're doing, why they can't have phones or whatever it might be, that is a very accessible book. And he also has a Substack called After Babel, where he has a lot of the books published serially, like article at a time. Okay. If you don't want to get the whole thing, you could get a lot of bits and pieces of it from his Substack, After Babel. Jonathan Haidt is his name. Now, best practices when it comes to especially schools and so forth. I'm just going to summarize what he says. I've argued this before, and I did it in my own classroom in the public schools years back before it was cool. Basically, he says phone-free schools, full stop. Phone-free schools, full stop. What is? Oh, well, if you're going to be like doing this, yeah, maybe you can have it, in your desk and look at it when nobody's in your classroom. But yeah, when I did this in my classroom in a public school, I was the only classroom that went phone-free. I asked my principal if you could do it, and I did it. I presented on this 2 years ago at CCLE. It's on the YouTube channel if you really want to watch. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing here, but if you want to see what I did and why I did it and so forth. But basically, I said I was going to put my phone in the pouches too. Right? So every day I put my phone in the pouch, they put their phone in the pouch. They can smell a phone phony. So yeah, if they're going to do it, I'm going to do it. I think there needs to be that authenticity and that buy-in. And it was a fascinating year. It was the classroom management improved drastically. And when I did that, it was like 2016 or I don't remember exactly, but so it went so well in my classroom, the whole school did it the next year. It became a school policy. But then COVID happened. But anyway, so yes, I would say teachers should participate in the policy if this is going to be a policy. Again, what you do during your planning time or breaks, that's you. But he says phone-free, full stop. And what he means by that is not just classroom time. Okay, this is what some schools have done. They've done pouches, right? Maybe you do pouches, that's a great start. But he says it also needs to be in between classes. Because what happens after class if they get their phone on the pouch right out the door? Right? I remember, oh man, it was so crazy the last few years I was in public school. The hallways were so quiet. They were so quiet. I wanted somebody to drop the F-bomb, just to say a word. I wanted there to be a fight in the hallway, just for there to be noise. I mean, it was like zombie land, seriously. It was so crazy. Because as soon as class would end, here we go, right? And the Heights argument is they need that time to interact with each other, engage with each other, to learn social skills, and to take risks, okay? Embody risks in your body with other bodies, okay? That's what it means to be human. We are not minds on a stick, okay? We're not brains on a stick. That's what the device tries to turn us into, right? The device becomes sort of lenses through which we view the world. It becomes a reality mediating mechanism. It becomes the way we experience everything instead of experiencing things directly with our bodies, okay? So he argues it's got to be between classes as well. Now there's technologies, all right, for this, okay? There's phone lockers. That's a simple technology, right? It's basically a box that is locked, okay? And these could be by the door when they come in the building. There's also a company called Yonder that has these little pouches. You put your phone in the pouch, you scan it when you come in the door, it locks, okay? The pouch locks. When you leave the building, you scan the pouch, it unlocks, okay? So there are ways to facilitate this. If this sounds like, oh, how are we going to do this? There are ways to facilitate this. This is also being proposed in several states at the state level, okay? Virginia has proposed this. South Carolina has proposed this. I think California has proposed this. So this is like a bipartisan thing that is gaining momentum. And honestly, I think schools like ours should be leaders in this. I mean, it totally fits, right? Our whole thing is about like humane development of people, right? And if we can't lead on this, what can we lead on? Right? So there are states that are also pushing for this. What Height also shows us is that schools that have done this, that have done the phone-free full stop, they've seen amazing improvements in classroom management, in educational outcomes, right? And a huge reduction in referrals, okay? And what they found is that like kids actually start talking to each other again when they have to, okay? So there's, again, growing data and research to show that this makes an impact. So phone-free, first one. Second one, more recess. Unstructured time for kids, elementary, middle, and high. Okay, now that may be hard to fit into your schedule, but the argument is that, again, students need that unstructured time to develop those interpersonal skills. And again, the research here is accumulating. Schools that have gone back to recess, ironically, also start to see improvements in educational outcomes, academic outcomes, okay? And behavioral problems as well start to decline. So that's another one of the big things. Students need unstructured play to develop those human skills, and that actually has academic benefits as well. Third thing he says is that there needs to be collective action. Collective action. What I mean by that is, you know, I could individually decide with my kids to not give them phones. But if other people don't do that too, it becomes very hard for me to continue to make that decision, right? And my children or me don't benefit from that decision because everybody else is still like this, right? Do you see the point? Okay, it's a collective action problem. I have no real motivation to continue that decision unless I am really committed to this and committed to fighting with my kids to maintain this, right? Now, I just gave the phone as an example. I'm not saying that's the only example or that you should have no phones for kids. No, I'm just giving you that as an example. If that's something you commit to do, right, to up to a certain age, that can be very hard to maintain, right, when everybody else is getting a phone and so forth. So in other words, this is a perfect place for schools, right, local communities, churches to like decide together, hey, we're going to do this as families, or hey, we're going to do this as a school. And that way you get the benefit of everybody together deciding to do this, right? And then you actually get the benefit because everybody's not like this. They're like this. Okay. Now, how you actually skin that cat, that's a hard one. But I think it is a valid point. It's a collective action problem. So those are sort of his pieces of advice. Phone-free schools, more recess, make it a collective action. Okay. I'll stop there for any pushback or questions or comments so far.
The collective issue is always a tricky one because the next thing it does is the government's stepping in and taking over and directing you in a way that this isn't, well, not necessarily what you want to happen.
Yeah, but I don't mean government-led collective action here.
Right, that's the collective action sort of thing. You know, it's like, well, it's not just enough that our school's doing it. What we really need is for the county to do it. Because our kids are talking, you know, with
It's like the prohibition question. It started in local communities and then it didn't work, right? Oh, they can go get beer over in the other town, right? Oh, we got to stop it there. Oh, they can go get another state and get beer, right? Yeah. So yeah, no, I understand your
and
point.
then it all goes underground.
Yeah, no, it's a super hard nut to crack. I don't know exactly how to navigate it, but I do think it is a valid point that schools are a great test case, right, to see what happens, because it is a fairly controlled environment. And it's a community of sorts, right? So, okay. Anything else on the first half of that outline there? Yes, ma'am.
This is backtracking, but
Sure.
what did Hite say in his book about phones after school hours?
That would be up to the parent. Yeah.
Well, like on the campus after hours.
I'd have to go back and look. His main thing is the school day. But yeah, no, that's a valid point as well, that if this isn't something that is in some way reinforced at home, that there's going to be, it's probably going to break down at some point or not work as well as it could, but at least it's a starting point. His main thing is we have to do something. Okay, we've been running an experiment on ourselves. Okay, we need to stop running that experiment on ourselves because we're seeing where it's leading. We've got to do something. Yes, sir.
I'm old enough to see how fast the technology is progressing.
Yep.
Especially now with AI. Yeah, I think we remember when the first scientific calculator came on. We were still using math with a slide ruler.
That's right. Yep.
And the math teacher was no calculators allowed. And then the beeper came out.
Sure.
And then the first brick phone. And it was just we've been dealing with this for a long time. Spell check, we have no one that can spell anymore.
Right.
Because it's being automatically corrected.
Yeah, and all those trade-offs are sort of accumulating in this moment, right? I think that's really where we're at. We're seeing an accumulation of trade-offs that we've made to get to this point. And it all sort of centers on the digital interface, right? The device that goes with you everywhere. Again, I'm not arguing technology is bad. I'm arguing we need to think about it carefully and realize it is not neutral. Okay, now let's go on to the classroom side. What can we do about this in our classroom? As far as like classroom management policies, I did that 2 years ago. You can reference that if you're really interested. As far as assessment goes, I want to talk about assessment and curriculum. Assessment, first off, we have to like AI-proof our assignments. Okay, we need to think about ways that we can assess our students that are bot-proof. Okay, and what I think that's going to be is actually like perfectly parallel to classical education, where a lot of the ways we assess students is through discussion, okay, through debate, right, through presentations, through writing an essay in class, okay? Those types of things that can't be done by a bot or AI, okay? So I think the good old-fashioned oral exam, okay? Whether it's a one-on-one discussion with the teacher, whether it's a discussion in front of others, right? Things that a bot can't do, right? So these are going to be live, authentic assessments, I think are going to be very important. And again, classical education has been doing those type of assessments long before we had all of these things, okay? I'll give you an example I did in my classroom even before AI was a problem, and I call them colloquiums. There's probably a better Latin ending for that, but you're better at Latin than I am, probably. So basically I put 3 chairs in the front of the room, and students would prepare on a topic. They might read a text or an article or study a chapter in the textbook or whatever, and they'd have to be prepared to answer questions on that assigned text or reading, right? They'd come up and sit in the front, I'd ask them questions, the class would watch, right? Then the next 3 would come up, they had a different assigned text or chapter, they'd come up. There was no way that AI could do that, right? It is scary, but it's authentic, right? It requires a risk, and they all had to do it, okay? And that's one simple example. I'm sure you will have other examples, but you get the point, right? You need to think of assignments and assessments that cannot be done by ChatGPT, okay? Another thing I used to do is writing essays in class, timed essays in class with no help. Right? I used to teach AP US history when I was in the public schools, and that was, honestly, that besides all the ideology stuff there, I liked the fact that the AP exam at that point was handwritten, timed, no helps, okay? So in other words, the student had to develop an essay on the spot, articulate about the essay, right? Articulate the position they were arguing for, provide evidence, all, as my students used to say, straight off the dome, yo, okay? All from here, okay? And again, this is an ancient idea. Quintilian said that you only truly know what you retain by memory, okay? You only really know it if it's in here, if it's part of you.
Has a lovely trade-off that they're not up all night writing it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think this also requires us to rethink some types of homework, okay? Honestly, I think homework is overrated because it's, a lot of times it just turns into a mechanistic assignment. They're not really developing anything, and a lot of times it's an opportunity to cheat, right? Anyway, yeah. So those are some possibilities when it comes to assessments. Again, we could do many more. Can anybody give me a time update where we're at?
It's 4:13.
4:13. When did we go till?
4:30.
4:30. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll keep moving.
Was it a
I'll also say I did a presentation on Christ versus AI and transhumanism at Higher Things a couple weeks ago, and I asked the same question at the beginning. I said, "Who has a dumb watch?" And a little kid in the front raised his hand. I said, "Yeah, man." I said, "I need you to keep time for me because everybody else is moving their phones away." But and actually, a couple of them left their phones when the session was over. So don't forget your phones. Okay, you bring them with you. Okay, so AI-proof your assignments. I will also say, I think the machine mindset, if you will, creeps into education a lot, even classical education. And by that I mean, we begin to look at our students as a number, as something to be quantified. I got a 93, I got a 97, right? And I'm not saying we should throw out number grades, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it is very easy to let the machine become the template that we view everything through, right? We've got grade books, we've got rubrics, we've got all these things, right? It becomes not a human being there, but a number or a possible number. We quantify the student, and I think we do need to think carefully about that. That even when we're grading, we are not quantifying this student down into a number. They are a human being, okay, that we are forming and developing. And a lot of times you can't quantify that with a number. I will also say that it's easy to think of teaching as a technique. Teaching as a technique. In other words, I begin to think that if I put these inputs into my student, I will get these outputs.
If
Okay?
I just put it on the PowerPoint, I have taught it.
Yeah. Or all the techniques we use to try to communicate the information, right? Again, we're sort of taking that machine mindset, and that becomes the way we're viewing the process of teaching and learning. Teaching and learning are highly inefficient. They cannot be reduced to a technique. Now, Should we employ good techniques and skills and methods and activities? Yes, of course. But it is more than technique. Okay, so students are more than a number. Teaching is more than a technique. Those are just some side notes to think about as well when we think about the classroom and what we're doing in the classroom. All right, curricular suggestions. What can we do to the curriculum to strengthen it, to help our students engage in these questions and think about these questions? And primarily what I want to argue is that it's already there, especially at the upper levels. That's what I'm most familiar with. I was a high school guy, but and still am. But a lot of these things are already in the curriculum if we just sort of tap into it. So let me give you some examples. First off, I would say that when we teach history, we should also include some aspects of the history of technology. Okay? The history of technology, like we did with the car, right? That was just sort of a history of technology in a couple minutes, obviously. But that could be quite a fascinating discussion, right? Or series of assignments, as you're doing the Industrial Revolution or something, right? What was the impact of the car, right? What were the trade-offs of the car? Electricity, another fascinating one. What were the trade-offs of electricity? Think of all the questions you could have on technology in a history class, okay, as technologies and inventions occur. What was the trade-off of Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, right? The telegraph, on and on, the railroad, right? On and on you could go. And then you might even make it like local. How did the interstate impact my town? What did it do to the communities? And so you could totally tailor this to your community as the car impacted your community. Just one example. The clock, another great one. How did the clock impact history, right, or impact society? And some have argued that the clock was the invention that made the Industrial Revolution, okay, that made industrialization possible, the mechanical clock. Now that would be a fascinating discussion. How has time become more and more mechanical and segmented down to the second, right, down to the millisecond, down to the atomic clock, where you go all these, digits behind the zero, right? What does that do to the way I think about time? The way I think about my tasks, right? How does that impact the school day? Bells, right? Time slots, right? Which again, is somewhat of a mechanistic way of viewing the process of education. When is the lesson over? When the bell rings or when we're done, right? Again, I'm saying things provocatively to make a point, right? Now, what's interesting with the clock, that could also lead into like a fascinating connection to both mythology and theology, okay? Because there's two Greek gods, Kairos and Chronos, okay? And those names are also the names for two different types of time in Greek. Chronos time, chronology, right? Chronological, second, minute, that type of time, calendar time, if you will, clock time. But then there's the word kairos, which means like meaningful moments of time, okay? So not time and space-time, but meaning time. In other words, there's a time to plant, right? There's a time to harvest. There's seasons of the year, okay? To give you an example, a Chronos way of viewing my daughter's birth would be to say that she was born on December 21st, 2009. And that would be a Chronos way of thinking about that event. Or I could say, that was the moment I became a father. That would be a Kairos way of thinking about that event, right? Now, there's just a connection to mythology, some Greek words, and connection to theology, because in the Bible, when does Christ come? At the fullness of time, and guess what word is used? Kairos. This is the moment. This is the defining moment of history when Christ comes into the world and sort of reinterprets all of time through him. Time is like being folded into Christ and then sort of sent back out. And then think about the church year. The church year is Kairos time. It's not Chronos time. Kairos time. These are the moments, the defining moments that pull us out of clock time and take us into eternal redemptive time. All types of connections there you could make just by starting this discussion about clocks. A higher level example, but this would be a fascinating study, maybe like senior thesis level or upper level high school. The history of transhumanism as a distorted Christian eschatology. A lot of big words there. But what does transhumanism try to do? Well, it tries to basically live forever through technology, okay? To try to transcend human limitations through technology. That's a distorted Christian eschatology, right? We don't live forever through technology, right? We live forever through Christ and so forth. But that would be a fascinating study to do that. Again, that would be a higher level thing, but you get the idea. So there's all types of things we can do in existing courses. I think philosophy as well comes alive when we start to engage in these questions. Historically, philosophy deals with like big questions about mind, the mind-body problem, right? Those types of things all of a sudden mean a lot more when we've got ChatGPT that, well, is it a mind or not? Right? Is this a conscious being or not? All those types of questions now might seem a lot more relevant in the study of philosophy and theology. Right? What does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to have a mind and a body? And to be in mind-body unity. Right? That's the Christian view of the human being, that we are a whole being, right? Made up of mind and body. Philosophy comes alive, I think, as well. Math and science might be the place to like really dig into how a large language model works, perhaps. How do these things actually function? Math, science, logic, those could be possible places for that. So there's really a lot of possibilities when it comes to curriculum. And then let me just make a couple points when it comes to some of the classic texts, or we could also say good books. I'm not going to get into a debate whether some of these are classics or not. They're good books. If we think of some of the Greek myths, I already mentioned Kronos and Kairos. Prometheus. What happens with Prometheus? What's he do? What's Prometheus steal? Thank you, Kate. Steals fire. Steals fire from the gods. This is a technological grasping that allows Prometheus then to develop the forge, right? To craft technologies. And Prometheus also had a brother. Anybody know?
Kate does.
Kate does. Epimetheus. Okay, Epimetheus. So Prometheus has a brother, Epimetheus. And usually the way the story is told is Epimetheus is like the dim-witted brother, the afterthought brother. That's literally what his name means. But there's also a school of interpretation that says that Epimetheus actually wins in the long run. He doesn't technologically grasp for something from the gods, right? He doesn't try to become God, if you will, through technology. He actually ends up making a decision that requires risk, love, and hope. What does he do? He marries Pandora. Okay. Epimetheus marries Pandora. And if you know the story of Pandora, basically she's the Eve figure in Greek mythology, right? And Epimetheus marries Pandora, and Pandora had one thing left in the box. What does she have left in the jar or the box? Hope. Now there's all sorts of technological elements of that story if you tell the whole story there. Okay, so that's another example. Lots of things we could do from Greek mythology like that. The Bible itself has a lot about technology. In the early chapters of Genesis especially, most technologies are connected to the line of Cain. Okay, and then think about the Tower of Babel. That's a technology. Okay, and the city in the Old Testament especially is connected to paganism and demonic worship. Honestly, the center of the city was the pagan tower. Okay, now God redeems that by creating His holy city, Zion, right, where the center of the city is His temple. And what does He give to, what were their names? Oholiab and, help me out, Caleb. The guys who had God gave them the skills, the technological skills to craft the
Bezalel?
Bezalel and Oholiab, I think, right? Yeah. God gave them the skills to craft the items for the tabernacle, right? Is that right? Yeah. So God starts to redeem technology through His holy city. And where do we end up in Revelation? The city, right? The New Jerusalem, the holy city. Okay. So the story of the city in the scriptures is also fascinating. The story of technology, and the city is part of that. Jesus Himself is called a tekton, a craftsman. Okay. Tekton, that's the same word that we get technology from. So the Bible has a sort of a theology of technology, or development of technology. Where are we at time-wise?
6 minutes.
6 minutes. Okay, let's keep rolling. Some other examples from literature and so forth. So the Bible, Greek mythology. I'm just trying to find my place on my nose here, on my notes. Plato's cave. Duh. What happens in Plato's cave? You have people that are looking at the shadows, right, on the wall, instead of looking at reality. I mean, that's pretty obvious. What are we doing? We're looking at the shadows, right, instead of reality. There's all sorts of ways you could connect Plato's Cave, sort of a Plato's Cave redux, if you will. That would be a fascinating one to dive into. We could also look at Plato's Phaedrus. I'm just going to read you a quote from this real quick. This is one of Plato's dialogues, and here he is questioning a new technology. I'll let you figure out what it is. I apologize if my pronunciations are wrong. "O king," said Theuth, "this will make the Egyptians wiser and give them better memories. It is a specific both for the memory and for the wit." Themis replied, "O most ingenious Theuth, the parent or inventor of an art is not always the best judge of the utility or inutility of his own inventions to the users of them. And in this instance, you who are the father of letters, from a paternal love of your own children, have been led to attribute to them a quality which they cannot have. For this discovery of yours, you will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls, because they will not use their memories. They will trust to the external written characters and not remember themselves. The specific which you have discovered is an aid not to memory, but to reminiscence, and you give your disciples not truth, but only the semblance of truth. They will be hearers of many things and will have learned nothing."
Book.
The book. This is the technology of writing. Plato is already, again, trade-offs, right? He's dealing with the trade-offs of writing. All right? So it's in our tradition. It's in the things you're probably already having some of your students read, okay, or engage with. We just need to tap into it. The Iliad even makes a mention of automatons in Book 18. Okay, it's just sort of a side note, but an automaton is a technology, right? It's basically AI. Okay, now it's not developed in the Iliad, but that might be a rabbit trail for somebody to look into there. Book 18, the Iliad, automatons. Again, it's just mentioned. The Odyssey as well. I think we could engage with this because some of Odysseus' temptations are temptations to go away from the risks of human life, to embrace a life of comfort on the island with Calypso or Circe, right? To sort of transcend his humanity with these goddesses and become immortal. And he falls for those temptations for a time, but eventually he embraces human living with his own wife Penelope and even death, right? And there's some powerful passages about that in the Odyssey. Now again, that's not directly technology, but it is related to what we're talking about, what it means to be a human being, and how we tend to go for the things of ease, right? Instead of those embodied risks, those human-to-human things that, yes, are difficult, yes, eventually lead to suffering and sorrow, but also are beautiful, powerful, meaningful, etc. Okay, a couple other examples. Frankenstein, great example. What was the book also called? The Modern Prometheus. Okay, that was her other title for it. Fascinating story. It is not a horror story. Okay, it is a story of a technological grasping for a human being to create new life with their own hands. Okay, and the effects of that lead to alienation, loneliness, and so forth. I did a recent piece on this for Lutheran Witness Online and sort of unpacking these things in Frankenstein. Great example. A lot of the dystopias are great examples to engage with these technological questions. Fahrenheit 451 would be a great example. Honestly, I think Brave New World is a perfect example of this. Whether you want to call these classics or not, again, I don't really want to get into that debate. They're good books one way or the other. I'm just going to read you a little excerpt from Brave New World to make this point, if I can find it on my sheet here. I might have to summarize it for you. I should have got this in more order, I apologize. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so the story of Brave New World, you've got this, basically this world controller named Mustafa Mond. Talk about a good name for a world controller. Mustafa Mond, right? You're living in a world where you're really pacified through soma, right? A drug that they take, these pleasure jolts that you get hits of through powder and aerosol and pills and all these things. My goodness, that's the device, right? The pleasure jolts we get that draw our attention away, that fragment who we are. But there's this figure, John the Savage. He's the only remaining human being who was born of a natural mother, okay? And he and Mustafa Mond have a conflict at the end, towards the end of the book. And here's the interaction. John says, I like the inconveniences. We don't, said the controller. We prefer to do things comfortably. John responds, but I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. In fact, said Mustafa Mond, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. All right then, said the savage defiantly. I'm claiming the right to be unhappy. Not to mention the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. There was a long silence. John the Savage said at last, I claim them all. Mustafa Mond shrugged his shoulders. You're welcome. I mean, talk about a launching off point for what it means to be human in the machine age, right? Now we can critique what Huxley says there about what it means to be human, right? This would be a great opportunity to show where he's right and where he's wrong, right? But that's just, I mean, that is so relevant to these technological questions. So those are some examples I have. I'm sure there are many other examples. My point is they're already there. You don't need to add a class. You don't need to change your curriculum per se. You might just be able to tweak things, right? Focus on these things because they're so relevant and important today. All right, I guess that's time. All right, let me just, yeah, that's it. All right, that's good. Thank you, appreciate it. If you have questions, we'll take them afterwards. I guess I'm getting
That was a lovely journey.